and thank you for joining today's webinar on simplifying and managing your external identities using Azure AD. I am Nikhil Chahare. I'm a director with Agile. For today's webinar, I'll be joined by my colleagues Randy Beamer and Mike Tridden. We also have a guest speaker, Anand Koka, enterprise architect at Intact Insurance Specialty Solutions, who will be talking through the external identity transformation program at Intact. With that, let's look through the agenda for today's webinar. So we'll start with a quick introduction on Agile, on who we are, and then begin the session with an overview on external identity management, what it means, how does the traditional architecture differ from the modern approach, the methodology for account lifecycle management, and then flow into the most important part of the webinar for our guest speaker, Anand, who will discuss the Intact case study and how they went about leveraging Azure AD for one of their insurance services and what their future plans are for leveraging Azure AD B2C. This will be followed by a demo on some of the essential use cases like sign up, sign in, password reset, profile edit, something that we have developed in our lab environment. These use cases usually apply to most of the industries like healthcare, retail, manufacturing, very similar to what we've done in the past with MVP Healthcare, talking to members and providers on how they went about their migration to B2C. So stay tuned on the demo. And then lastly, we'll cover the Agile's Quick Start program. We'll talk through the objectives, discuss how you can start modernizing your external identity program in a matter of weeks using Microsoft's Azure B2B, B2C, and then end the webinar with Q&A. Feel free to post your questions as we go through this content. We will address these questions as we go and then take up anything that needs a verbal response towards the end. So let's get started. So quick introduction on Agile. Agile is a fully acquired subsidiary of Wipro. We are a national consulting practice with 20 plus years of security, compliance, and identity experience. We predominantly work across the three practice areas that you see here on the left. Most of our workforce members are Big Four alumni. Our first identity and access management practice, we do strategy, implementations, end-to-end transformation programs for all your identity needs. We are a top delivery partner with SailPoint in this space. The second one here, cloud security and information. This is a lot focused on your cloud journey and how we can help accelerate adoption of top security and world-class solutions. We partner with Microsoft in this space and can help you with strategy, implementation, any of the Microsoft enterprise mobility and security solutions. And then lastly, our integrated risk management practice line focuses on governance, risk, and compliance solutions. We are an elite ServiceNow partner in this space, and we help our clients build the modern risk management programs. Overall, our Agile's strategy first approach, offering a full suite of consulting services, and we specialize in highly regulated industries such as healthcare, finance, retail, energy. So now to give you an overview and some thought leadership on external identity management, I would like to pass it on to Randy.
Thanks, Nikhil. So the Microsoft External Identities feature set is distinguished from the legacy or classic way in which organizations have supported external identities with things like LDAP directories and federation servers that they run that infrastructure themselves. Microsoft is now delivering a set of capabilities as a cloud service that handle nearly all of the use cases that we would have historically done with these on-prem technologies. The capabilities are marketed and advertised as external identities. But behind the scenes, what Microsoft is delivering as a solution for external identities breaks down into two fairly distinct technical approaches. There is, in the Azure AD and Office 365 system, there are capabilities that support external identities that Microsoft brands and labels as B2B. And it's a bit misleading because the other set of technologies that they label B2C are also appropriate for B2B scenarios. So that labeling, which is all they used a few years ago, is not terribly effective at calling out what these two different technical approaches really intend to solve. So I just want to take a minute to describe first the B2B and this notion of a guest user object in an Azure AD corporate tenant. And the use case that guest object is really optimized to solve are collaboration scenarios involving things like Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive. And in support of that B2B model, there are portal-based and GUI-based self-service workflow capabilities and lifecycle management capabilities that are all delivered from the corporate tenant, the Azure AD, with this B2B class of capability. The B2C technology is a very different thing than the corporate Azure AD. It still runs in Azure AD, but the process of standing up an Azure B2C tenant directory is different. It is a new resource that you go create in your subscription. And the characteristics of that Azure B2C directory are quite different. So while it is a directory like the corporate directory, the major distinguishing factor is that in a B2C tenant, a user has no permissions. Whereas in a corporate style Azure tenant directory, users in your workforce have fairly extensive permissions to go read properties of themselves as well as other users and groups and their group membership. Okay, so it's much like an on-prem Active Directory in the B2B world, although a guest has fewer rights than a member in the corporate tenant. In the B2C style Azure Active Directory, the user objects basically have no permissions whatsoever. They can't read themselves, they can't read other people. Its only real purpose is to support a login process, and for users that are characterized as local accounts, that means password management on that user object in the directory. Okay, B2C also supports a very, very rich federation model. So a user can be a local account with a password. That user can be a local account with a password and additionally able to link to a social networking IDP, like a Facebook or a Google. It's also possible for that user to be federated, for example, over to an Azure AD corporate tenant. So from within an Azure AD B2C environment, we can support, both consumer-facing use cases with passwords. We can support consumer-facing use cases with social networking login using things like Gmail and Twitter and Facebook and other social networking IDs. But we can also manage access using federated identities where that federation trust can be to Azure generally or to specific tenants or to specific external IDPs like an organization with an Okta or a ping. Okay, and all of that is possible with on-prem technology. We can do all of these things with an ADLDS, an ADFS, or a ping federate server and a ping LDAP. What's different about doing it with Azure is it is truly a cloud service. We're just paying for a subscription. We don't have to stand up any infrastructure. and we don't really author any code to integrate with it. All we really have to do is configure the system. And there are two ways in which we configure that system. We can configure that system by point and click in a management console, and we can configure that system by editing configuration files whose format is XML. So the traditional approach on the left, standing up LDAP servers and writing code and having token issuing federation servers, we achieve all of that by configuring a cloud service. So what is that cloud service? At the bottom of this slide, there's a label called Azure AD B2C, and then a sublabel Identity Experience Framework. This Identity Experience Framework, this IEF system, is kind of the label for the runtime engine that consumes our configuration documents and determines what's going to happen while the transaction that ties an application to the identity system while that transaction executes. So we build these XML files. They're represented kind of just to the right of center at the top. They're called policies, custom policies. We load that policy into the Identity Experience Framework engine, and then using modern open standard protocols, a user is going to attempt to access a relying party application. That relying party application is going to execute an open standards browser style redirect. It can be SAML, but the best results are achieved when we use OpenID Connect. So that request goes, that R in the center of the picture, that goes to the Microsoft service, this Identity Experience Framework engine, and part of that redirect specifies what policy experience do we want this user to be given. And that sets the user off on what Microsoft calls a user journey. And in this diagram, you can kind of think of it as left to right. We can define a number of steps in that policy user journey that do things like prompt that user for a username. And then we can execute logic on the username that's supplied to do things like look them up, decide should we prompt them for a password, or should I route that user over to Facebook, or route them over to the company's Azure AD corporate side and let the login happen via a federation trust. Okay, the third box at the bottom, I can say, hey, in this context for this user at this time to reach this application, much like the corporate conditional access system, I can use conditional access inside this framework and trigger things like an MFA. I can do things like email validation and self-service password reset, mailing an OTP code. I can do profile edit and progressive profile data collection, asking that user for additional input. Maybe we let them sign up the first time with just an email address and a display name. Okay, but maybe on their second visit or third visit, we might want them to supply more biographic data. So all of those scenarios we are able to achieve, and we're not writing any code. So this is, I don't want to say truly codeless. These XML policies feel like I'm writing code when I do this configuration. But I have found no way for me to crash the Microsoft IEF. I can't write buggy code. I can deliver configuration files, and if they don't pass inspection, Microsoft isn't going to load them. So it allows Microsoft to deliver a truly global cloud scale system where I, as the consultant working on behalf of my client, we're the consumers of this Microsoft service. We don't have to provision machines. We don't have to worry about scaling out. If we put Azure Front Door in front of it, then we've got global-wide traffic routing, where the transaction will route to the nearest available Microsoft data center. So it's truly a global scale solution. There are organizations using this thing with hundreds of millions of active users. But it also works for organizations with just a few thousand active users. So, as a cloud solution, it will scale to whatever dimension is needed. So we've got XML policies that handle all of these use cases. Okay, I want simple, reliable, secure, single sign-on access to a portfolio of apps. I want social IDs to be able to use it. I want corporate identities to be able to use it. We don't care. We just have to maintain a user record with enough detail to support the routing decision to where should I send that person to log in. Okay, the advanced threats. The licensing model embedded in this thing is the Azure Conditional Access System. Okay, I don't have all of the rich conditions that are available on the corporate side. I don't have the same level of device awareness that a corporation achieves with Intune management. Okay, I do have the ability to do some device fingerprinting and to know if a returning user is returning from a device that they've used previously or if they're coming from a new device. So certain of those kinds of scenarios are possible. Number three, so much of this is simply managed by Microsoft that all that infrastructure, Microsoft is handling the compliance obligations for their cloud service. So my burdens are much, much less. It's still my data. My company owns that data that we put into the directory. And I would say these days, best practice is be very careful on what data you choose to host within the security directory. And I would advocate only store data that's relevant to security decisions. If it's purely application, business-oriented data, then perhaps the better model is to store that data closer to the applications. But we have huge freedom, and we can build a hybrid. We can put directory data in the Azure Active Directory. The schema is extensible. But during the token issuing journey or process, I'm able to augment these claims that go into the token by calling any REST API that I want. So I can augment the claim data that finally appears in the token by reaching out and getting data from other locations. Okay. Apps, customers, partners, my employees. It doesn't matter, and we only need to be managing credentials really for the people for which it's appropriate. And in most cases, I'd much prefer to not be managing passwords for my customers or my partners, and I only want to manage passwords for my employees in the corporate system. And with B2C, I can link the two. Okay, customization. It's not just the process that is being undertaken or performed by that identity experience framework engine that can be customized. This stuff is white label. So out of the box, we've got some Microsoft look and feel that just with some portal config, we can put custom logos and colors and branding on it. But we don't have to stop there. All of these pages can be almost completely customized. We can achieve the look and feel that any marketing team or application development user experience teams can define and describe in HTML. You know, there's a couple things that have to be done Microsoft's way, but they are effectively just the username and password fields. They have to be available to get this process going. Everything else on the page is under the customer's control. Next slide. And now I'm going to hand it off to a client that Agile has done work for, Anand at Intact Insurance.
Thank you, Randy. Hi, I'm Anand Koka. I'm an enterprise architect at Intact Insurance Specialty Solutions. Intact is a subsidiary of Intact Insurance Group USA. We are actually a wholly owned subsidiary of Intact Financial Corporation, which is a major insurance carrier in Canada. They have expanded their global specialty services with acquisition of Intact. So we truly offer specialty insurance to our customers. We are unlike other insurance carriers. We are not focused on personal lines, so our needs are unique. Our underwriters are unique in what they support. So we target quite a variety of businesses, such as accident and health, with their gig economy or sharing economy platform. We have commercial and contract surety. As you can see, we have varied sets of insurance coverage within our portfolio. We have about 12 or 13, depending on the day, different insurance companies within this umbrella. Next slide. So we are new to the Azure journey. It's only been 2 years, couple of years. Part of it, we have to actually provide a service to our customers in the gig economy space, and we needed to create an experience that they are accustomed to, such as, I mean, as you can imagine, a sharing economy consumer is primarily a mobile device driven consumer. So making that experience seamless and useful in a mobile format in any device, anywhere they are. Also, how do we make our on-prem identity solution could not manage the Azure environment for us. So we were technologically, it was a bit of a challenge. Also, we needed to move into the newer protocols such as OAuth and OIDC. And we also wanted to make sure that we didn't need an enormous amount of knowledge in bringing up and maintaining these systems and upgrades and all of those things. As technology seems to be changing, especially around security, things are changing so rapidly. We wanted to take advantage of the Microsoft's offering. Next slide. I had approached Microsoft and they recommended that we work with Agile, and almost immediately their willingness to help out and their knowledge, deep knowledge in the space really made the choice easy for me to actually figure this out, that this is the way I would go. The low code configuration is really what drove us to the solution being very attractive. Changes when the security best practices change, we don't necessarily have to change a whole lot because Microsoft is on the leading edge trying to make all those capabilities available and also incorporating many of those changes into it. The cloud platform, from a scaling standpoint, our systems prior to this weren't 24/7. We could quickly achieve a massive availability window using the Azure B2C platform, which is global in nature. So we don't really need to worry about where our data centers are located, how the user experience is, the latency, all of those. And the device aware user experience. I didn't have to write a single line of code to actually make that work. It all comes with it. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to login security and these things, I didn't want to recreate what is most commonly experienced by users. So that's one of the things. If there is a standard way people are using internet today, that's the way they should be allowed to use, have that same experience. Next slide. This is a little bit difficult to read, I understand, but I wanted to showcase that we were able to customize our screens to our specifications. So the login screen, as well as email verification when they're registering for the first time, where they provide their further details. Minimal set of information. We haven't yet taken advantage of the progressive profiling, but we collect minimal set of information at the time of registration. The couple of screens on the left, you can go back. That is the IEF workflow. It is XML. I just wanted to highlight a little bit of it. They are thousands of lines long. It is XML, not highly structured, but it's kind of a language unto itself, but it is expressed as XML. So it's kind of interesting, but at the same time, you need to develop some expertise in it for sure. And finally, the screen once they log into our application. So I just wanted to show the progression there. Next screen. So the results were that it's a low friction and yet secure registration process for our end users. They didn't really have to do too many things, and the experience is very common. The built-in email verification makes sure that it's not being abused by bots or somebody without access to an email trying to game the system. So verification is a key part of it. We have been able to reduce our support calls drastically because the experience is not out of the ordinary for the end users. Brand identity was important for our marketing group, so we were able to implement it relatively easily. One of the big attractions for us is really the monthly active user licensing model, whereas traditional approaches were based on the number of users in a directory. Microsoft uses the monthly active users, especially our clientele is not, they're not coming to our site every single day. So monthly active users reduces the licensing costs enormously. We could have built our own UI and use Graph API to process the flow, but Randy convinced me that we should use an identity experience framework. It's fairly nuanced and certainly not a trivial task at scale. I happen to have a bright young developer, and she was able to accomplish much of it with Randy's guidance, but not for the faint of heart. So going through thousands of lines of XML isn't a trivial task for sure. Next slide, please. So this is now we are moving on to the next step. The success of our cloud initiative led me to believe that we should look at our on-prem identity management for our external users. So we are engaged with Agile right now in a strategy to actually replace the on-prem IDP with Azure external identities. Obviously, we have had our systems for 20 plus years, so it would take us some time. So we are identifying the steps required for coexistence. Roadmap for transformation, and then very important part of it is identify the quick hit opportunities. What can I get done today as opposed to 6, 8, or 12 months down the road? There you have it. Michael, will take us through the demo.
Thanks very much, Anand. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Tritton. I am an architect with Agile. And today I'm going to be walking you through just a few demo topics just so you get the idea of how B2C works and just kind of experience it for yourself. So before we jump into the demo, let me go to the next slide. The thing that I want to talk about real quickly is kind of the overall flow of how a user and the browser interacts with B2C, because it's kind of important to understand when you're actually going to implement this. So I do want to mention before we go into the demo that this is hardly the limit of what you could do with B2C. You know, this platform has such amazing capabilities and so much flexibility that you really can get, you know, into endless detail on how complex you want your scenarios to be. But this is one of the more straightforward flows. And what I'm going to be using today is authorization code flow, which is a pretty average authentication flow for modern web applications. Of course, B2C also supports things like SAML. Many legacy applications will use SAML. Or there are also other, you know, OAuth 2 flows which you could use. But for this demonstration, I wanted to show off something that would be pretty common to modern web applications. So I'll just go ahead and walk through this this flow diagram here. So it all starts off with the user, and a user, of course, is going to navigate to your web application. And since they won't be signed in, you will have them either click login or automatically be directed if they are not, if they don't have a session. So they'll be redirected off to B2C. And at B2C, B2C will present their login form to them, and they'll go ahead and enter their user credentials. And then at that point, they will be redirected back to the web app with what is called an authorization code. Okay, so the authorization code is not in itself necessarily useful, but the web app can then redeem that authorization code for a access token. And this access token is useful to actually call things like protected web APIs. In combination with this access token, B2C, because it implements the OpenID Connect framework, also will give you an ID token. And an ID token is kind of additional information about the user, which can help you, you know, see things like the person's name, their email address, and other things which might be useful for your web application. For example, if you need to hook into some sort of legacy platforms or anything like that, you can send information which would help that application do that in the ID token. Okay, so that's enough on the slide. Let's actually jump into the demo. Okay, so you can see it's pretty bare bones, just so that you can get the idea of how everything works. I do want to point out that right now we're sitting on localhost and I'm not logged in. So the first thing I'll do, I'll go ahead and click sign in. And this is going to actually redirect me to my B2C tenant and display the sign-in form. Okay, now this URL can be customized with something like Azure Front Door. But by default, it's going to use b2clogin.com. So let's go ahead and I'll just talk briefly about the things on this form. So obviously we can do a regular sign-in using an email address and password. We also have a flow for if people forget their password, we can go ahead and help them to set a new one. We also have a sign up flow. And then, of course, the one that everybody loves is a social account, which can really make it easier for people to do sign-ins, and just so that they can have one identity across all of the different web platforms that exist out there. So to start off, I don't have a user account yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a sign-up flow. And I'm just going to use an email account here. So you can see here, I am demonstrating Microsoft's ability to do MFA. MFA is incredibly important to pretty much any modern authorization platform. And in B2C, it's incredibly easy to configure. This is, it takes you minutes if you really know what you're doing in B2C, just stand something up. And of course, if you want to customize it, use custom email templates and the like, you can always call your own web APIs to send those emails and do that kind of thing. Okay, so I've received a code, verified, and I'm going to set a password here. Then set display name, give a name, and surname. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to click create, and you'll notice that we are now in SMS MFA. So of course, Microsoft is not locked into one type of multi-factor authentication. We can do many different things. We could do even one-time passwords with the Microsoft Authenticator application. Just about anything you could dream of, we could potentially support. So go ahead and send off a text. And I've got that now. Verify that. And at this point, you can see that I've been redirected to my application and I have identity information. So you can see that it knows the person who logged in. And the reason that it knows that is because, as I mentioned during that brief introduction, B2C is actually giving us an ID token, which tells my web app all about the user. So I have a page here where we can kind of inspect that. And in this case, you can see that there is an email, a name, give a name, surname, and then some other information that may or may not be useful to you. We also have some claims such as the subject, which is basically the object ID in the back end of B2C directory. So you might want to use this in case you were doing updates using the Graph API or something along those lines. So one thing that I'll demonstrate here as well is that I can call protected APIs. So this page here, as soon as I navigate here, just is calling a protected web API. And one thing that's really important, if you've designed your APIs correctly, it can use the access tokens that B2C gives you in order to securely call these APIs in such a way that you can only get information that you should have access to as this user, and you can't use it to retrieve other people's information. So if you're doing things properly, the security is part of the platform here. Okay, so that's a pretty basic flow here. One other thing I'd like to demonstrate here is that I can actually edit my profile. And as soon as I do this, it's going to redirect me back to B2C. And of course, for this demonstration, it's a very simple edit profile. And again, you can get as complex as you want. But in this case, all I am able to customize about this user is my first and last name. One common thing that people may want to do is be able to change their email address that they use to sign in. And that's something that would be easily supported within the B2C platform. And change my first name from Michael to Mike. And continue. And you can see immediately we're redirected back, and the application knows that my profile's been updated. And so that's a pretty straightforward edit profile flow. Continuing on from here, one thing that people always love to see is, of course, social identities. So I'm going to go ahead, sign out, and then sign back in. And now let's go ahead and log in with a social account. So I'm just going to log in with a Gmail account that I have here. Password. About that. Okay, and you can see we went off to Google and came back to B2C with information from Google. This was not pre-populated from the B2C directory. This was actually relayed back from Google back to B2C. So you can see that it gave a good display name, good first name, good last name. And I'm just going to go ahead and accept those as defaults and create this user. Okay, so now we're back in our demo application. You can see that it knows who I am. If I go into my introspection here, I can see that what it passed me in the ID token is that email that I used to sign into Google with. So we could also pass, I want to mention, of course, that you can always pass additional things in this ID token. You can give applications whatever they might need, like those unique IDs that you might have in your backend databases or whatnot, just so that they can do those more complex scenarios. Okay, so that is the social sign-in flow. Let's go ahead and sign out again. And of course, one more important flow that many users will experience at some point in time is the forgot password flow. So let's say that I come in here, I totally do not remember what my password is. I can just go in here, click forgot your password. It's going to redirect me. You may have seen the application come up there for a second because of the way that B2C works. In this particular case, it sent me back to the application, said, hey, this user needs a password reset. Sometimes the application may want to intervene there and do some sort of password reset themselves. But in this case, all that I have the application set to do is go back to B2C and go into the password reset flow. Of course, we could create a policy which didn't have that redirect. It could all just be built into one if that would be the experience that you wanted. So most common way to do a password reset is just to enter your email address. And it should send me a code here. And I have verified my code. Now I'm going to verify my phone number. And get that. And I can set a new password. Okay. So I am back into my application. If I look, what you'll notice is that we actually now have two ID tokens because, like I mentioned, we were redirected to the password edit policy. So we've got one ID token from password reset here, and then also one from sign up sign in, which I retrieved silently in the backend just so that we could do things like call this protected web API. So that's about it for the demo. I will now hand it off to Nikhil.
Thank you, Mike, for the demo. So what Mike just showed are some complex transformations behind the scenes. It takes a lot of effort. It's not, and in the larger picture, it's not just the technical integration, but the organization change management transformation of it. It's a high touch program. If things are not implemented correctly, it can cause downtime on your revenue making business. In the end, it has impact on your customers on how they log in and access your services. So how do you get started? What's applicable to you? To answer a lot of these questions, Agile has put together an external identities quick start program. So this quick start program focuses on quick ramp up to deploying your services to production environment, building an execution plan, a roadmap for your external identity management journey, something that we have done for Anand and the Intact Insurance, and establish that technical reliability of your use cases using Microsoft's Azure's B2B, B2C service. So this program covers all types of different use cases that are applicable to your identity program. So as part of this quick start program, we'll basically leverage the power of Azure B2B, B2C to build that identity experience that works for any user using any identity on any device. You review your UI UX needs for a sample portfolio of customer-facing applications. We have a world-class team of UI UX team that will go through your app portfolio and how customers interact with your systems, provide recommendations and opportunities for improvement to provide that consistent look and feel and the solutions that work for your brand. We will demonstrate the MS Azure AD B2C capabilities in your customer tenant and kind of very similar to what Mike was showing you, the sign up, sign in process, demo that out, how it can be streamlined for better user experience, use of custom policies, demo these policies on how they can be implemented, excuse me, to alter your sign up, sign in experience. We have a lot of pre-built packages ready to be deployed to build that strong baseline and show value quickly. The invitation process, how to build that strong and secure invitation process for new customers to sign up for your services. The bring your own identity strategy. That is groundbreaking, and it's a growing trend. So technically speaking, it's a form of federated identity where access to different services is permitted through credentials provided by a third-party provider, very similar to what Mike showed using Google, and not credentials created by the service itself. The SSO, MFA, application access experience. So if your application needs additional security controls like MFA, we have predefined workflows that can be seamlessly integrated and can be demonstrated as part of this Quick Start program. And then the one of the big ones like the user migration strategy. So a lot of the companies have the legacy IDP solution and they want to migrate the users over to the Azure platform where you typically see a impact on the end users. So we, as one of the most challenging tasks. So there are different options, just like just-in-time migration or having users re-register again. So this program will focus on the most appropriate user migration strategy that would work best for your environment and your customers. And then lastly, the identifying application integration patterns for your future state IAM system. Focus on how these apps can integrate with your B2C service. So what does the timeline and the program framework look like for this Quick Start program? It's a 8 to 10 week, depending on your needs. So from concept to real feel in just few weeks. Very similar to how we started with Intact. We started with a small program, helped launch their service, and now we are working towards getting Intact from their legacy IDP into moving into Azure AD. So it all starts with the analysis and planning phase, where we conduct interviews, discover the current state identity architecture, identify pain points, gaps with the current setup, review your UI UX needs, if any, identify opportunities to improve your customer experience of how they interact with your applications and systems, align all your needs with the program goals, start exploring future state model, understand the user base, application roles, the authentication protocols used by our app portfolio. The second phase of this program focuses on configuring a sample B2C application in your tenant. We typically can leverage that's out of the box provided by Microsoft, or work with you if you have a sample application that you want to wire it up using B2C. We can come in and do that, register this sample browser application, demonstrate user experience with out of the box Microsoft offerings. This includes showcasing the capabilities that we spoke about on the previous slides, and then this can be custom tailored to your needs. The third phase here focuses on the Azure DevOps. We can configure DevOps, to promote B2C configuration as a code into the production environment. So essentially having all the wiring in place to the point that if you decide to move your sample app into production, you have the pipeline ready to migrate the code in the production environment. So this is very unique to our service offering. So that can be leveraged as part of this Quick Start program. And the last phase here focuses on the future state roadmap. So as part of this phase, we create that future state external identity conceptual architecture for your environment, build that plan for displacing legacy IDP solution, discuss different application integration patterns, user migration strategies, your plan for common branding across the digital estate. So everything kind of part of that future state roadmap, and the output of that is kind of a 2-day workshop where we go through everything that's covered in this previous phases, give you the detailed execution plan, have something which is pre-production ready, and if you choose, you can move it into production, including the timeline, the cost, milestones that are required for modernizing your external identity transformation program. So by the end of this program, you will know exactly what you need to do, steps, processes, things you need to take care of to execute this plan, and basically end to end in about 8 to 10 weeks, and something that we can execute pretty quickly. So now we move on to our last segment of this webinar, the Q&A section. So before we go through the questions, just want to call out that if you need more details or want to connect on the Quick Start program, or need anything you want to know more about and how you can modernize your external identity program, you can reach out to me or reach out to the Agile at info@agile.com. We have a strong team of business development professionals who are spread across nationally and can help you connect with the right set of folks to talk through your next steps. So now let's go in and dive into some of the questions. I think we did address a few that came in on the chat. There's just one, I'm gonna quickly check. I think there's just one question that we wanna talk through it verbally. So that's, what are the different user migration strategies that you have implemented for your customers? Randy, do you wanna take this question?
Yeah, certainly the easy button is greenfield. You know, standing up some new app with no pre-existing users. We can stand up B2C very quickly and people can start signing up, including, you know, predefined federation trust with partners. Okay, unfortunately, that's not how the real world typically works. Almost every org we engage with has a portfolio of existing apps and some legacy technology. And it's rarely an easy switch to just modernize the apps and convert it over a weekend. In almost all cases, we end up in some duration of coexistence, some period of time where people are using apps that are wired up the new way against the cloud service, but they're also using apps in the portfolio that are using legacy on-prem technology. And the best, you know, outcome is the user gets a single sign-on experience. They don't know that there's two different environments and systems behind the scenes. And so there's, you know, a couple different technical ways at which we implement that. But what is almost always in common is during a coexistence period, we're actually relying on the legacy to do the password validation, because, you know, it's a rare system that would allow us to extract clear text passwords out of the legacy and promote them and store them in the Azure cloud. You know, the way we typically go about migrating accounts and their passwords is during the login, we're able to catch the clear text password in the user input, and instead of testing it against B2C, we make some kind of an API call. And what is built into B2C is we can make REST calls. Okay, but if the backend system is LDAP or SQL, then we need some middle man in the middle, some REST endpoint B2C talks to, that in turn is making an LDAP call or a SQL call to some system to check the password. Now that we've done it, we can migrate data about that user into the cloud, including the password, because we just validated that the password is the correct one. Okay, so strategies like that are unfortunately unavoidable. And there's always the dilemma of how long do we go in that coexistence mode? Because no matter how long we wait, not all of the users are going to use the service during that window. So at the end of some interval, we don't want to keep running the old stuff. We've migrated all the apps. We've migrated 50% or 75% or 80% of the passwords. Okay. Unfortunately, we don't want to keep in that mode endlessly. So at some point we turn it off. And now if that user had an email or had a phone number, we can support a password recovery for them purely on the cloud side. Okay. If they had no method of doing that supports a self-service password recovery, then it's going to require human intervention if we're going to really award control of that account back to the end user. And often people don't even try. It's just, hey, they got to register for a new account. But yeah, in all of our projects, coexistence and migration is the hard problem. And there are good solid approaches. And in some cases, we've done bidirectional sync processes, keeping the LDAP directory and the B2C directory constantly synchronized. That's a hard approach to achieve, but it's doable, especially with certain LDAP systems that offer their own inherent sync engine, sync capability. In other cases, we've got one client right now where the password hash was exportable. We're storing that hash of the old hash in the B2C directory. Okay, so the coexistence is endless because that hash is stored in B2C and we've replicated the hash algorithm in a REST API. So B2C can call a REST API applying the same hash as the legacy system did. Okay, so it's, slightly different techniques. The second that I've described is we did a batch migration. We just copied over all the legacy data and it's now available on the B2C side. The other model is, some period of coexistence. But great question. That's the hard problem.
Thank you, Randy. Moving on to the last slide. All right, so if you enjoyed today's webinar, please join us for upcoming webinars on April 19th, which is focused on ServiceNow GRC capabilities. The Agile team will be at the Gartner IAM Summit as well on 22nd, 24th August. So if you happen to be there, come swing by, and we would like to talk to you guys, and looking forward to in-person discussions. So again, for more information or to register for any upcoming webinars, you can visit agile.com/webinars. Thank you again for joining today's webinar. We appreciate your time, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.